Hi everyone, this is Heather. Thanks so much for joining me. Today I've got 2 card tutorials for you, and we're going to be making 2 I Miss You cards that have a bit of a masculine feel to them. I know a lot of us struggle with making masculine cards, so I thought these cute dog cards were perfect. Now's a really great time to send a card to someone that you might not be able to see in person to let them know that you're missing them. The stamps I'm using today are the Woof Pack stamps from My Favorite Things. They have some really adorable dogs with accessories and some really great sentiments. This is a newer set from them. From Stampin' Up, I'm using their Pinewood Plank embossing folder. And from Lawn Fawn, I'm using their Polaroid die that goes along with their selfie frames dies. For the card bases, I've taken an 8.5 by 11 sheet of black cardstock, cut, scored, and folded in half for both my card bases. Out of 110-pound white weight cardstock, I've cut 2 squares that are 2 by 2, and then also 2 of the Polaroid frames. From Mementa, I have 2 pieces of paper, a brown and a gray, that are both cut to 5 by 4 1/4. They already have this really great kind of wood grain paint washed look to them. They have a little bit of texture, and they also have a white core. And I've got some really fun dog themed pattern papers from Stampin' Up. This is from their Playful Pets. For the brown card, the fur paper has been cut to 5 by 2 1/2. The words by 4 3/4 by 2, and the accessories 4 1/4 by 1 1/2. For the black card, the pattern paper with the accessories has been cut to 4 1/4 by 2, and for the words 2 3/4 by 3 1/2. I'm going to use the embossing folder on both the brown and the gray cardstock. So I'm going to lay them in the folder and run this through my Big Shot machine on both pieces. So now that these are embossed with the raised edges, and because I've used a white core cardstock, I'm going to lightly sand these with my Tim Holtz sanding block, and that is going to remove some of the color and leave a little bit of white showing through and really enhance that texture of the embossing folder. Next, I'm going to stamp my images, and I'm using black Memento ink, and on my 2 by 2 squares, I'm going to stamp both my dogs. I'm going to center them in the middle. And I've got this one guy that's scratching on one. On the other one, I've placed the dog and the little ripped up pillow. And a little bit of this will be off the edge of the paper. And I'm stamping that one on my second piece. I'm going to set these aside for a second and stamp out my sentiments. And the sentiments are in a row, but I wanted to stack them. So I'm going to mask them off a little. I've got a piece of just regular Scotch tape. It's clear, so it might be a little hard to see. I'm going to place that over the back half of the sentiment and ink up just the front. Don't forget to pull that tape off. And now the inking is just on the top of the sentiment. I'm going to stamp and center that close to the top on this Polaroid. I've cleaned off the ink, and now I'm going to cover up the part that I just stamped. I'm going to ink up the back part of the sentiment. Again, don't forget to remove the tape. And now I can line this up under the top part of the sentiment, and I have a stacked sentiment instead of a long sentiment. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing with the other sentiment on the other Polaroid. And now I'm ready to color my images, and I'm using tri-blend markers from Spectrum Noir. These are some of my favorite alcohol-based markers. You get 3 colors and 1 marker, and it makes for really easy blending. If you're not familiar with these markers, I have loads of videos on my YouTube channel. So I've colored in the body of the dog with the lightest shade of Tan Blend. Then I'm going to add some shading and shadowing with the darkest shade of the Tan Blend marker. Just kind of go over the areas where you want it to be a little bit darker and the color to be a little bit heavier. Then I'm going to go in with the medium shade of the same Tan Blend marker of over color in between the dark and the light shades. And then back to that lightest color again to blend all three of those in together. And then sometimes lastly, I'll go back to that darker marker and add just a little bit more shading and shadowing in a few extra places where I'd like it to be a little bit of a deeper color. And I also went ahead and did his ears in that same shade. I'm moving on to his nose and his spots. I'm using red brown blend and also his tail, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm putting down the lightest color first, then moving on to the darker shade. Add in a little bit of that medium tone, and then blend all that back in together with the lightest shade. For his collar, I'm using the dark red blend. I'm going to apply the lightest shade and then add a little bit of shading and shadow with the darkest shade, and then just leave it as is. I'm not going to blend anything in. I didn't want a stark white background, so I'm going to be adding in some color with the fair skin blend. Everything that is not the dog is going to be colored in with the lightest shade of that marker, and that adds just a nice subtle background color. I'm going to take the medium shade of the fair skin blend and I'm going to trace all around my dog. I think that just gives it a little bit of grounding in the scene, adds a little bit of extra depth and dimension. So just carefully follow along the outside with that medium shade. And then with the darkest shade of the same marker, I'm going to add just a little bit of shadow underneath the dog. And to finish this dog off, I wanted it to look like some little fleas were kind of popping off as he scratched. So I'm just taking a fine tip black marker and just making some little dashes for the fleas. Moving on, coloring the gray dog, I'm using the lightest shade of brown gray blend and I'm filling in the main body of the dog and also his nose. I wanted his spots to be white, but I didn't want them to be stark white, so I'm going to kind of just outline them on the inside of that stamped line just a little bit, just so that they're not stark white. The fuzz that's been torn out of the pillow, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add my shading and shadowing with the darkest tone of the brown gray blend. I'm going to go in with that medium tone and over color a little and back to the light to blend everything in together. Using the same dark red marker, I'm coloring in the dog's collar and the pillow. And I've done the same coloring with the dark and the medium to add my shadows. I'm going to do the same technique with the background on this card, but I'm using the ice gray blend in the lightest shade to completely fill in the background. And after filling in the background, I'm tracing around my images with the medium tone and using the darker shade for some shading and shadowing underneath the images. And here's our finished colored images. And now I'm ready to begin assembling my card. I'm going to start off with the brown one. I've placed tape runner on the back of that wood panel. I'm going to center it on my card base. And with these strips of pattern paper, I'm going to create some banners. So I'm going to put the two corners of the paper together, kind of fold it in half, and just lightly pinch the center there. I'm going to use that pinch with that little line that I've created as a guide. I'm going to take my scissors from the lower right hand corner and cut up at an angle to where that pinch is in the center. And then I'm going to just mimic this on the other side. And that gives a nice little fishtail banner. I'm going to do that on all three pieces of this pattern paper. I've placed adhesive along the back of all of the banners that I've created, and I'm going to place them off to the right hand side of my card, lining them up across the top of that wood grain paper. I've also applied tape runner to the back of the dog piece. I'm going to adhere that to the front of my card. I'm going to adhere the Polaroid down with some foam tape. I'm going to put some larger pieces across the bottom and then cut some really thin little strips to go across the top. I've peeled the backing tape off of the foam tape, and I'm going to center that onto my piece over top of my stamped dog. And there's the first card finished. For the gray card, I've applied tape runner to the back of the accessories piece of pattern paper, and I'm going to line that up across the bottom of the gray wood grain cardstock. I'm applying some ribbon between those two pieces of paper. I'm just bringing it around to the back and taking a piece of Scotch tape and just taping those edges in place. I've also got adhesive on the back of this gray piece. I'm going to center that onto my cardstock base. I've applied tape runner to the back of the words paper. I'm going to tip that at a bit of an angle. I've also got adhesive on the dog piece. I'm going to tip that kind of at the opposite angle. I've applied foam tape the same way as I did on the other Polaroid. I'm going to adhere that to the front. And there's our other finished card. So here's both of our masculine missing you cards. I really love this dog set. It's so cute, and there's so many different occasions that you could use it for. The wood grain texture on the background and the fun pattern paper I think work really well for a masculine card, and I'm really happy with the way these turned out. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to check out my channel and subscribe, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!